Hi, folks. In this video, I've brought back Melanie Gibbons Taylor, another trainer from the Advocacy Academy, to help me convey the wide range of experiences that can lead a person to experiencing trauma symptoms. So, thanks for being here, Melanie.
Thanks for having me. I'm always excited to be here.
So essentially, trauma, as you know, Melanie, it occurs when a person's mind and body are overwhelmed by some kind of threat. But Melanie, what does it mean when I say a wide range of things can lead to trauma symptoms?
Yeah, it's very specific to the person, right? So there are a lot of experiences that for one person can be a positive and maybe even helpful, that for somebody else can be traumatic. I mean, the one I like to always use as an example of this is childbirth. I've had friends who have had very traumatic experiences with childbirth, even though that was the best day of their life. The circumstances surrounding it created that overwhelming with the mind and the body and thinking that they were a threat. That is what caused them to have trauma regarding that experience. So there's a lot of different ways in which someone can experience trauma.
Yeah, and that's a great example because you're right. Some people will think of that time of life blissfully,
Mhm.
happily, like it's the greatest joy, and other people will look back on that experience in a very different way. I generally like to categorize some of this as, you know, chronic stress can lead to trauma. So chronic stress is the kind of stress that overwhelms the mind and body for a long term kind of way. Like it goes on and on and on. I usually move my hand like this, like a timeline. And so it's when a person's nervous system feels constantly overwhelmed or overburdened or activated, and they don't really get much of a break from it. So a lot of people will describe the chronic stress that they have, maybe like living in a home where there's a lot of arguing, and they might say, it's just day in and day out, and I think I've gotten used to it. Like it's just my life. It's just what I know. But even if you feel like you've gotten used to it, your body, your nervous system may not agree with you. It lives constantly activated and on edge. And this can also be true for people who live their lives facing discrimination, facing poverty, maybe not knowing where their next meal is coming from. But I just want you to think about those things in life that create a kind of tension and stress that goes on and on and on. Now, that's really different from another category of things that can lead to trauma, which is more severe stress or life threatening events. These things feel usually more like episodic, like there was a day a thing happened, and that day that thing happened, now I have all these trauma symptoms as a result. And so you might think of things like being assaulted or abused or going to war or some sort of sudden loss or accidents or natural disasters or things that involve some kind of intense betrayal that just like rocked your world and shook your foundation. Those things cause us severe stress. And it might be more short term compared to that chronic stress, but it can be really overwhelming to a person. So those two things tend to lead to traumatic symptoms. So chronic stress and that kind of severe stress or life-threatening stress. But there's another category that I think sometimes people will misuse or overuse the word trauma to describe. And this is more like mild stress or inconvenience or something that's uncomfortable. And a lot of us are noticing more and more that it's become, I don't know if you even want to think of it as like slang, but people are just throwing around the word trauma to describe things that maybe just were like unpleasant. So okay, arguing with a friend is unpleasant and uncomfortable, unlikely to lead to trauma symptoms. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it seems like a leap to say that it might be traumatic. Receiving criticism, like getting a bad grade on a test or a bad performance evaluation at work, is uncomfortable and it doesn't feel good. I don't know if it's very likely to lead to trauma symptoms. Um, maybe like a breakup is one of those things that's typically pretty mild stress, unless it's maybe a divorce where like the family is breaking up, or there's some kind of severe betrayal. We did mention betrayal earlier. But things like that, I think, generally would fall outside of the area of what tends to cause trauma in a person's life. Now, I'm using words like tends to and probably won't because I can't guarantee any of these things. But I think that we can think of these categories. We've got chronic stress, severe stress, but then over there is maybe more mild stress. And that's probably outside the area of traumatic experiences. What do you think, Melanie?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. The kind of the chronic stress in terms of not getting a break from it, right? Within the severe stress is like a kind of a big, hard moment in somebody's life. But I think the most important thing to remember when we're thinking about how someone might experience trauma is that what leads to trauma oftentimes depends on context, how sensitive somebody is to their nervous system, their own past history, and what kind of support do they have around them, right? So, for example, like you mentioned, a breakup might not be traumatic for one person, but for somebody with attachment wounds or abuse history, it can be. That could be a really traumatic experience for somebody. Something like a car accident that seems maybe minor to somebody, they can physically, still get around and all those kind of things may cause trauma depending on their perception, how deep of a threat they thought it was, how their nervous system responded to that accident, or for somebody else, it may be something they can get over and kind of move on. So I think the really important thing to note is that it really depends on the person. There's a lot of factors that will lead somebody to experience trauma symptoms that maybe the same experience will not lead to trauma symptoms for somebody else.
Yeah, it's a really great point, and it makes me want to go back to the initial definition, which is like trauma is when the body and the mind have been overwhelmed. And I can't really know what's going to overwhelm any person I meet in the world. So I can't know for sure if they're overwhelmed by their breakup or overwhelmed by their car accident. I can't know that. And so, for that reason, when I do come across someone who's maybe assigning the word trauma to something that I think is maybe unlikely to really lead to trauma, rather than thinking that person is wrong or that person is stupid or that person is crazy, I might think to myself, that seems surprising. It doesn't make them wrong, but I think I can give myself permission to think in my mind, wow, that grade on the test seems like something that probably would have been mild stress, but I just can't know for this person, can I? I just can't know. Thank you, Melanie. I really appreciate you helping us out with this.
Absolutely. Always happy to be here.